Again, thank you for joining Paula and me to discuss what I think should be a pretty relevant and interesting topic. I've been monitoring the future of work quite closely, and I'm really excited to share some insights with you. Our topic today, as you can see on the screen, is about future-proofing your organization and what it's going to take to be successful for you and your organization in 2020 and beyond. We intend to keep this webinar relatively concise to get you back to your day as quickly as possible. And what we'll have is, after the webinar, some additional detail available, including a white paper that we've collaborated on with some of our colleagues here at Kepner-Tregoe. And we'll send you a link after the session for a recording and to take a deeper dive. So let Paula and I just quickly introduce ourselves. So I'm Jason O'Neill. I'm the head of Global Training Services with Kepner-Tregoe. My job here is to manage our training portfolio, manage trends in learning and training, and to help innovate and prepare our clients for what is now facing them in the workforce and for the future of work as well. Go ahead, Paula.
I'm Paula Bruskowitz, and I'm Director of Organizational Transformation here at Kepner-Tregoe. That means I'm responsible for the capability development of our workforce worldwide. So I'm obviously keen to share what we've learned and keen to share what you can use going forward. Thanks, Jason.
Absolutely. So here's what we're going to cover today. The first is major transformational changes forecasted for 2020 and beyond. We really want to talk about some of those trends. There's about a dozen. We're going to cover a few pretty quickly and give you some ideas of what we think is going to be affecting business here and for the next few years. We're then going to talk about the skills that we think are going to be necessary to build really important capabilities within your teams and organizations to prepare for the future of work. And finally, and Paula, by the way, will talk about that. And at the end, I'll come back and talk again about the role for human resources, learning and development, training, organizational development, whatever functions you're in, and how you can play a role to prepare your organizations for the future of work. A little bit about Kepner-Tregoe, just very briefly. Next year is our 60th anniversary. For 60 years, we've been training folks in critical thinking. Our founders were pioneers in what it takes to teach people how to think. And we've kind of transformed our focus over the years to make sure we're not just training, but we're focused on capability transfer. And so we want to make sure that folks can go back on the job and find success, achieve an ROI with those new skills. And lastly, it's always all about results, and our clients are always saying, well, how will critical thinking and problem solving help us? And we're always looking to find ways to show that there's an ROI for those type of capabilities. Just in terms of our overall reach, we have a very tenured staff of folks with lots of experience on 5 different continents, and our expertise covers manufacturing, operations, leadership development, and IT and customer support, amongst many others. So there's a little bit about KT. I'm seeing a couple of questions here if there are slides going to be available afterwards, and absolutely. We'll make slides available as well as the white paper that we've put together. Okay, so let's get into the details a bit. So our founders, Ben Tregoe and Chuck Kepner, they wrote a book called The Rational Manager. It's kind of the foundation for everything that Kepner-Tregoe was founded on. And they had a quote that said, it started with, "The pace of technical change is so great." Now, you hear that all the time, right? The amazing thing about this quote is that it was from 1965. So literally, customers have been coming to KT for over 50 years, talking about how crazy things are. The pace of change is increasing so fast for 50 years. So nothing that we're seeing today is different than what it's been a long time ago. We're just seeing even a whole heck of a lot more of it, of change than it is today. So what does that look like? Well, change is constant and global and accelerating. And I have a former colleague I used to joke with that every article and every white paper you've ever read starts off with, in today's complex world, things are changing so fast. And, well, you know what? Why don't we just jump in with both feet, Paula, and talk about how things are changing so fast, right?
Yeah.
No matter where you look, technology and the landscape of business are changing faster than ever. And this change is affecting companies all over the world, and there's absolutely no signs that this is slowing down. If you look in the news today, there are news stories that you would used to see for weeks or months that would be covered that now are gone in the blink of a 24-hour news cycle. It's incredible how things are changing, and it's overwhelming, and it can be stressful, and it's kind of just the world we live in. You hear people talk about the new normal sometimes. So what does that lead to? That leads to uncertainty. Where is this all going to take us? And it's so hard to say. There are experts and pundits and all sorts of people out there who have written articles and made predictions, and it's tough to predict what's going to happen tomorrow or in 2018. We have conversations about that all the time, but try and predict 3 to 5 years out, and you got your finger in the air testing the wind and praying, and it's nearly impossible.
How true.
Yeah, and you can't have a good webinar without a quote from Yogi Berra. I mean, I think he sums it up pretty well. It's pretty tough to make predictions, especially about the future. All right, so there's this unknown, right? Well, this isn't just me saying there's an unknown. I'm a Twitter guy. You can follow me on Twitter. And a respected Harvard professor and the former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors agrees completely. I really like this tweet. So just a couple of weeks ago, he said 3 things about the future of work. 1, work has a future. Well, yes, there will be jobs and money and businesses, and a lot of, this is going to be going on forever, right? Number 2 is that no one knows what it is. So here's a guy that works at Harvard, surrounded by the most brilliant students in the world, researchers that, are uncovering amazing things, and they have no idea what the future of work actually looks like. But his third comment is kind of the perfect lead-in for our discussion today, which is, what is it going to take to be prepared? And he says education. So I'm a dad. I got a first grader and a little one in preschool. Education's important for them. Education's important for students in university and trade schools, but it's also really important in business when you talk about the skills employees will need for today and beyond. And this is kind of the blueprint for what we think it's going to take to be prepared. The old Scouts motto, right? If you take out a map with that old compass that you used for orienteering back in Boy Scouts, and you try and chart a course for success in 2020 and beyond, skill development is going to be one of the ways we're going to be prepared. And we need our people ready for whatever comes in this completely uncertain future. I assume that many of you on this call are talent, training, skills-oriented people, right? This shouldn't be that bad for us, right? This is our job. And maybe we'll just go out, we'll hire a bunch of technologically inclined millennials, and they'll be fine, right? I just don't think so. And there's some really interesting information about why that's the case. So first, an Oxford study from 2013 projected that nearly 50% of all jobs could be completely obsolete by 2034. That's 50% of all jobs. And that's due to technology advances and innovation and a whole lot of things. So we're going to have a plenty big workforce, but some skills will be in very short supply, and other skills are going to be completely unneeded. And I saw another study that said that the half-life of a skill is only 5 years. So every 10 years, something you learn is completely obsolete, and you have to replenish with something completely new. So my wife sends me shopping. I'm trying to manage the kids and all that, but I always want to get the milk that's not going to be expired. I'm the one on my hands and knees digging around in the back, trying to find that expiration date for as far out as possible. And to me, this is the approach that you need to look at with skill development. What skills are going to be around for longer than that 5 years of half-life that you can continue using? And what that looks like to me is the blueprint for future-proofing your organization. If the pace of change is speeding by on a boat, then your choice is get hit by it, get run, the wake is going to knock you over, or hook up some skis to it and go, and really try and make sure that your people and your organizations embrace change and thrive. So that's kind of an intro, right? So let's get into what we're seeing as what some of these transformational changes and what's happening around us today and over the next couple of years. So first, let me advance the slide here. There's this thing called Industry 4.0, and I've been hearing about it for a while, and I didn't actually know what it was until someone actually defined it for me, which it literally means the fourth industrial revolution. It's a technical revolution, and it is a monster. It's changing people and businesses and the way we think and our society. And to quote the World Economic Forum, the speed of current breakthroughs has no historical precedent. All right, so there's all that crazy change again, right? Here's how we got here. Go back into your probably 7th grade social studies books, and you're at the first industrial revolution where we're talking about using water and steam power to mechanize production. Okay, all the way through the second and third revolutions up to where we are now, the fourth industrial revolution, which is digital and occurring probably since the second half of the last century. And it's characterized by this crazy fusion of technologies that blur the lines between physical and digital and biological. And this really is possible through the connection of billions of people through like mobile devices, unprecedented processing power, storage capacity, and access to knowledge, which are at this point becoming nearly unlimited. All right, so if you have Industry 4.0, it sounds neat in a textbook. What are some of the parts of Industry 4.0 you're seeing? The first big one is digital transformation. For a really long time now, this has been a term that people have talked about, maybe as long as 20 or 30 years, but it's come a long way. It used to be about getting rid of paper. Remember, back when I was in college, we talked about companies going paperless. I think we're pretty far beyond that now, Paula. We are talking about keeping up with technology and implementing it. And it started off with the question, when I was a kid, we got our first desktop at home. Do people at work need desktops? And then we started talking about networks and cloud computing and ERP systems and all that. And so this version now of digital transformation in Industry 4.0 is really, it's hard to define. One CIO said this, what we're talking about is this blurring of lines between supply chains and partners, customers, and employees. And we're talking about like true transformation. You take off your leg, get yourself a better one. This is what businesses are trying to do through digital transformation. A guy named George Westerman, he's with the MIT Sloan Initiative. He says that digital transformation is when companies use technology to radically change performance and the reach of their enterprise. I think it's a pretty good explanation. But whatever we're talking about, Harvard said that 65% of business leaders expect a significant impact from digital technology in the next couple of years. So if you can get half of CEOs to agree on anything, there's got to be something there, right? Okay, so that's trend number one. Number two is something maybe a little bit easier to understand, but harder to predict where it's going. So robots, automation, robots are everywhere. According to a couple of reports that I saw, the number of robots increasing in the workforce are dramatically increasing, while the number of jobs in areas where robots are being implemented is going down. And that's from the National Bureau of Economic Research. So robots have the ability to automate processes and, well, just about everything. And this is where all this change is coming from, right? So you're seeing packages and freight being delivered by drones or like driverless trucks. I mean, driverless cars are here really soon. You got manufacturing plants running without humans. And I even read something about a robot journalist. The Guardian, which is a really reputable publication, talked about whether or not a robot will eventually win a Pulitzer Prize. So it is not impossible to think, Paula, that Kepner-Tregoe in the future, when they want to run a webinar, is going to say, yeah, we got a good topic. Let's get robotic Jason and Paula to go implement the webinar or go do the webinar.
Well, I hope not.
Yeah.
Hey, Jason, we
Yeah.
generally think of robotics on the assembly line or package delivery. I recently saw an article in D.C. where they're prototyping an Amazon robot to deliver packages.
Yep.
You enter a code to get yours. But do you think we'll see robotics in both the service and manufacturing sectors?
Yeah, so of course you're seeing it in manufacturing, right? But in the service sector, so whether you're talking about food or consulting or something in between, are you going to see robotic consultants instead of the McKinsey guys show up? I don't think that's anytime real soon. But I think that question is the perfect segue for this other trend, right? Because this other trend we're talking about is artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's what's really going to be changing service and how we interact with people. What is this thing? AI, right? You hear a lot about it. So there are forecasts, and then there's this. This is really hard to predict. AI is kind of a collection of technologies that allows machines to sense, comprehend, and learn. And you're going to see improvements in the way that your computer, interact without humans programming, software releases, and technology implementations. That's kind of crazy, right? On the screen, I had this amazing experience with Amazon. Second time we brought up Amazon a couple weeks ago. I ordered a printer, and I got an email that the printer was going to be late, but I needed it for something. So I went on to my app on my phone, and I went into the chat feature in Amazon. And immediately, the Amazon service person, or the robot comes on, this artificial intelligence, and says, hey, you're probably on here to talk about your printer that's coming late. I was like, yeah, you knew that. We order dozens of packages a week on Amazon. Our door's piled with boxes. But they knew that's what I wanted to talk about. And they apologized for the delay. They tried to provide me additional information. I asked a couple of questions. I'm going back and forth with this machine. And then it kind of reached the point where it couldn't help me anymore, and it immediately kicked me into real-life April. And April from Amazon customer service popped in here on the far right and started helping me out with what I wanted. And it was one of the first times where I was like, dang, like I really felt the artificial intelligence.
Kind of scary.
Kind of scary, right? and speaking of scary, right, so how smart can these computers get? Of course, you've probably heard of Elon Musk. He founded Tesla. He's an entrepreneur. He is worried about AI in a way that I had never seen before. He's saying it's a bigger threat than North Korea, and he's calling for significant regulations with how crazy this could go. So in one hand, I'm pretty happy I got my Amazon package and got service, and he's worried about it taking over the world. There's a lot to be noticing, I think, with that, right? So there's a few trends. I'm really interested to know, though, what you folks think. So we created a poll, and let me get this started up here. Our poll, you should see there, asks what future trends or what future trend do you see most influencing your organization? And we listed just 5. I could only list 5. Digital transformation, robotics and automation, AI, Internet of Things, and big data. So if you're in full screen mode, go out of full screen into the main website, and you scroll right below, and there should be a place where you can enter in your information. And if you think that there's nothing on here relevant to you, feel free to chime in on the ask a question box, and let us know what else you see that might be influencing the future of work where you are. Got lots of votes coming in right now. So we got a tie game. Well, it looks like digital transformation is pulling away a bit. We're not seeing much from robotics and automation. So I wonder if that means maybe we don't have a big manufacturing type of audience. It looks like, good, we got more votes coming in. I kind of expected big data to be a big one. I didn't even cover big data because I thought, like, everybody's hearing about that too, right?
Right. That's been in the news quite a bit, obviously, and how people are handling it.
Right. We got a question from the group. Let's see what we say there. Okay, so, yep. So I'm going to stop the voting here. So we got about a good amount of participation, right? So digital transformation, number one with 34%, followed by the Internet of Things. So again, I didn't cover Internet of Things, but that's really the Internet of Things is that all these connected devices talking really blends in pretty well with machine learning too.
And that could be cloud and visualization, which someone mentioned also.
Oh, someone chimed that in.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, so good. Thank you so much for participating, but pretty even split between all of them. So what does that mean for us? So why should anyone in human resources, L&D, or talent care about all these trends? Well, before machines come and take all of our jobs, we should probably get ready. And since we can't predict what actual jobs will be out there, what technology is going to look like, or even there's going to be some new company that takes the scene by storm and changes everything overnight. There's some pretty good data out there that shows that we can get our people ready. So, Paula, maybe a little bit of discussion here about how can we get our folks ready?
Great. Okay. Hi, folks, again. Now that Jason has discussed our unpredictable, uncertain, downright scary future, I'd like to introduce you to the skills that we at KT believe are critical to thrive and survive and stay ahead of your competition in 2020 and beyond. Since there are no crystal balls in real life, we're relying on well-founded research by the World Economic Forum. Jason mentioned them before, and according to the WEF, there are 10 skills that we need to survive and thrive within this Industry 4.0. They base their conclusions on research performed by asking chief human resources and strategy officers about what the future of work will mean for employment, skills, and recruitment globally, obviously a topic we're all interested in. They calibrated these results against those from a few years ago, and this is what they found. Hopefully you won't be surprised by it. But in their Future Jobs Report released in 2016, this World Economic Forum's research indicated that more than a third of the skills important to job success today will have changed or shifted importance by 2020. And not surprising is the fact that complex problem solving holds a top spot in 2020, the same spot it held in 2015. In spite of this changing world in which we live, at the core of almost every company now and in the future, tells us that we need people in our workforce that can quickly assess issues that arise and efficiently work through difficult situations. And on that number 2 on the list, well, that's changed with more emphasis on critical thinking than 5 years ago. And actually, critical thinking skills go hand in hand with complex problem solving. Other interesting points, number 3, creativity, took a huge leap. As the world becomes more complex, more complicated, so must our ideas and the ability to react to these the changing world and bring these new concepts into play. How often do you hear, we need to think outside the box? That phrase hasn't gone away and is going to be repeated quite often. Did you notice the new entries in the 2020 list as you scan that? Emotional intelligence. That's been around since Daniel Goldman's book from '05, but it stems from the popular belief that one needs more than technical ability to make sense of the world. And this is the huge rub on the robotics and whether they can really bring that about. And cognitive flexibility, the ability to transition from thinking about one concept to another and to think about multiple concepts simultaneously. How much have you heard about multitasking lately, and if we can really do that or not? These both are necessary skills to adapt to this change. We all recognize that future leaders need more vision, strategy, and people leadership skills. Those have been around for a while. But to excel in this changing, complex environment, they need to be masters of problem solving, decision-making, and critical thinking. So, not so coincidentally, Kepner-Tregoe's history has been founded in the roots of studying critical thinking skills, primarily focusing on problem solving. Our founders, Ben Tregoe and Chuck Kepner, recognized these skills as fundamental to success in business when they started KT back in 1958. So we feel pretty confident they're going to be crucial in 3, 5, and probably 10 years. We also see decision-making as key, but won't have enough time to discuss decision-making in detail today. So let me tell you more about critical thinking and problem solving.
Paula, I actually have a good question from someone in the audience. I would actually mention, one or two people are mentioning more technical issues in buffering. Click on the live support button on your screen there, and hopefully you can get some help. But I'm on a slide that says in 2020 and 25 with different skills. Hopefully you can see that. The question from the audience was, each of these skills requires the working public to be skilled in a certain way. Each of those skills needs its own time to be learned and applied completely and correctly. And can you comment on this? So I'll take that one if that's okay. I think it's a great point, right? So what we're going to talk about here are some of the skills that we think folks will need. But this isn't about a 2-hour training course and go out and be a better problem solver. This is definitely about learning and applying these skills correctly to an uncertain business environment that's coming forward. We think some of these skills, like Paula just said, for 60 years, KT's been talking about problem solving. We know that's still going to be an important trend in the future, and these need to be learned and applied almost fully. This isn't just about, adding a new course to your catalog.
And they have to be second nature too, which is why underlying all of your education and development should be critical thinking and problem solving, because they can get you into a lot of other areas that perhaps you don't know about yet.
Yeah, that was a great question.
Yeah, thanks. So what are the skills we're going to be looking at specifically at KT? Well, the first is critical thinking. And the World Economic Forum describes critical thinking as using logic and reasoning to identify the strengths and weaknesses of alternative solutions, conclusions, and approaches to problems. The first thing to notice is that their definition somewhat combines approaches to problem solving and making decisions. So for the sake of this conversation, let's expand this definition even more and talk about how people think overall. There's been a lot of great research recently in social science and behavioral economics about the need to slow down our thinking. I know that's counterintuitive in this changing, fast-paced world, but logic and reasoning takes time, and to really understand how to approach a problem, we need to take our foot off the gas.
It might be hard to sell to people these days, Paula.
Yeah, it is hard. It is really hard, as Henry Ford indicates. Your brain doesn't like thinking too hard. And recent scientific study proves that. But Henry Ford knew it decades ago, as so did Chuck and Ben. So you really can stand out in a crowd by being one of the few willing to take a step back, figure out what's really going on, and then taking action. So what are we saying? Trusting your gut feels good, but it's proven not to be an effective way to approach problems you haven't seen before. We at KT have found that you can actually teach people to slow down. It may seem counterintuitive, as I mentioned, as things around us are going faster and faster and faster, but we're suggesting you put on your blinders, focus only on the key data you need, and then speed into action once you've thought through situations slowly.
Slow down. Yeah.
So the second skill we'll discuss is complex problem solving. And as defined by the World Economic Forum report, complex problem solving consists of developed capabilities used to solve novel, ill-defined problems in complex real-world settings. So what does this really mean? And what do we learn from it? Well, it could encompass anything from trying to figure out how to improve a business process, how to fix a network or server that went down, to solving a product quality issue, to figuring out why customer complaints are on the rise. And in this world where devices are all communicating with each other, business processes and systems are all integrated, and businesses operate all over the world, solving problems has gotten really complex and will only get tougher. Remember, you're rarely problem solving on your own, so you need teams, functions in your entire organization solving problems in some coordinated fashion. So what kind of problem solving skills are critical?
Good question.
I'll share a couple with you.
Yeah.
Don't swallow it whole, right? We've always talked about that. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? First, and the one that is so often overlooked, you need to break a problem down to its smallest parts possible. This is true in everything we talk about. Any change efforts, anything, you need to break it apart. So often people approach a big problem and try to swallow it whole. or they try to find one solution for a massively complex global issue that involves many different factors. I've seen this time and time, both at KT and at our clients.
Yeah.
At Kepner-Tregoe, we've seen time and time again that the first thing people jump to is cause-finding mode. After all, those are the people that get rewarded, right? The firefighters, which should be rewarded, but let's take a step back first. Let's throw out a bunch of solutions and try to get some stuff done and see what works. Isn't that what you see more often in the work world? Well, we found this to be a waste of time and money, and rarely is one single solution the answer to major problems. Attack problems in bite-sized pieces. You'll potentially need to work on one problem first, another one next, and then only after you've come up with solutions can you implement for both you can fix the original big problem. To do this, you'll need to start with the second really important problem-solving skill.
I like this one.
Fine.
Yep.
Yeah, use this on your kids.
Yep.
Find your inner child.
They have no problem with that. No.
What does that mean? Asking great questions. How many of you had recently had a conversation with a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, or younger? Do they ever stop asking why? Well, hopefully they'll hold on to that skill for the future because it is important. In today's workforce, your best problem solvers are your best questioners. They don't jump to conclusions or make assumptions without first asking good questions. So they can understand a problem at its core and break it into those bite-sized pieces. They want to gather as much data, real facts, and avoid opinions and unfound guesses about what could go wrong. At KT, we suggest with 2 of the most fundamental basic questions possible in every problem-solving effort. What is the device, process, object, customer, etc., that has the problem? And number 2, what's actually going wrong? What's the problem? Think about those 2. You describe your problem in detail. These types of clarifying questions will ensure your problem solvers are all on the same page and rowing towards that same finish line. And what goes along with asking good questions? Listening intently. Make sure you aren't thinking of your next question before hearing what's said, or biasing your intake with preconceived notions. How many times have you missed what someone has said because you're too worried about thinking of the next question or issue? You won't believe how much your problem solving can improve by just breaking down the problem into pieces and asking great questions.
I mean, how many workshops have we run where someone sits there and says, wait, you're going to try and teach me that the first thing I'm going to ask is what's the thing with the problem? It's like, yeah, you got to learn what's the thing with the problem, what is the problem. It's amazing how fundamental that is.
And we make it more intuitive, and you use your own language. You don't stick with our coined language or words, so to say.
Yeah.
But it works really.
Yeah.
So here's a famous quote from none other than Albert Einstein. And we'll take it to heart here and kind of summarize what I've been saying is if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. So that means spend your time defining the problem, figure out and narrowing it to one specific problem before you jump and generate solutions.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Paula. So you are Kepner-Tregoe's Director of Organizational Transformation. Your job is to make sure that KT folks globally are skilled to go attack the today and the future of work wherever they are. What are some of the things we're doing to get our workforce ready for 2020?
Well, that's a good question, Jason. Since critical thinking skills are really our forte, we're focusing more on applying these to real-world issues and concerns of the fast-paced, creative environment. We're bringing creative problem-solving into focus, and we're making sure at a global level that we're reaching our folks specifically and our clients around these critical thinking skills.
Yeah, and I would say that we're seeing a lot more requests for things like design thinking and more creative problem solving. So where we have a background in technical problem solving, the need to really solve problems with a customer focus in a totally different way is,
we're feeding a lot of that into our developmental goals.
Yeah.
So let's do another poll. And the poll question, Jason, can you get it up there?
Yeah, it should be coming up right now.
So we're going to ask you, what skill do you see being the most important to future-proof your organization? We're going to give you some choices here: complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, and coordinating with others. Again, if you're in full screen mode and you want to vote, roll your mouse over to the bottom of the screen, hit the icon with the two arrows pointing to each other, then scroll down below the presentation, and you should see those poll results.
The votes are starting to trickle in. Let's give them a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you don't see the skills on here that you think are key, jump into the Ask a Question box and certainly pop them in there. That's great. And there was another question about whether the slides will be available. Definitely. We'll have slides, white paper, and a whole bunch of other information for you after the WebEx. All right, Paula, we're starting to see some results.
What's it look like?
So we got critical thinking coming in about 1/3 of the audience, another quarter with problem solving, and then creativity is up there, even over people management and coordinating with others. It's amazing. Yeah. If you had said 20 years ago, creativity is going to be one of the top 3 skills you need, people would have thought you were nuts.
Yes. Yeah. So you can see, and underlying, everything we do are those critical thinking skills. They're very important to every organization because they're so applicable in many situations. And as Jason mentioned, we cannot predict what's going on in the future. So
yeah, someone else just popped in and said communication as one of them. Yeah, and I'd be interested to know, like, what do you mean, right? Yeah. Like, define what kind of communication, because, I mean, it could just generally, how people talk to each other, how you work with colleagues remotely and overseas.
Right. It could be asking better questions and knowing how to ask those questions, and then obviously that listening intently, which is such an important aspect of communication.
Great. All right, I'm going to stop the voting. We had a lot of votes. Thank you for doing that. Critical thinking was the big winner there.
Great. All right. Well, thanks. Well, I'm going to turn it back to Jason, and he'll go on and talk about the role of HR and L&D in this whole process.
Okay. So let's go. So the role of HR and L&D. So much of our audience here, hopefully, is in that space. Add in talent management and organizational development or transformation, like Paula is. And away we go. So the first one is, while if you go online and read anything about business trends today, you're going to see a lot about these trends. You got to create awareness. And I think it's so important that some of this awareness comes from learning and development in HR, and go proactively have conversations with your business unit and your operations stakeholders. I think that a great first step is really having an active discussion about the future of work, where these trends are going, and looking for you to guide the conversation. I think so much of the time we get feedback like the business saying, hey, learning, we need this, but if we can go have these proactive conversations, that'll be a really good first start. So jumpstart it, give them some caffeine to this conversation and get going. The next thing is about finding change. We really think that when you're having these awareness discussions, this can't be a general, generic conversation. You need to make sure that with the limited resources and the short period of time we have, you really want to understand where in your business these impacts are going to be felt. Where is digital transformation going to take shape? How are AI and robotics going to change customer service and the way that you interact with your customers? And you got to have these conversations about where these trends are going to have influence, and go talk to the SMEs in your business about where this is. Now, I've been saying now for 40 minutes, it's so hard to predict where this is going to happen. For sure, it's going to be hard, but I think taking some really good educated guesses where those impacts are will help making a plan developed by HR much easier to implement. So find where that change is. And then once you've had the conversations and you've talked about change, you got to focus on the skills. Now, we talked about a couple of them. We showed you a list of about 10 of them. Take a look at that World Economic Forum report and ask yourself, which of the top 10 skills are going to be most impactful for the areas that we have identified? And then it's worth having more conversations about this. Then, really based on the direction of your business, take a look at the courses that you're currently offering and say, am I able to fill the gaps where we're going to need for the future of work with what I'm currently offering? If you are, great. You're in great shape. If no, you're probably going to want to have a series of decisions around how do we fill in the gaps in our portfolio, our course catalog, to focus on those top skills that will be really meaningful for our organizations. And that's how I think it really is going to be effective. Last but not least is agility. Put together a plan. Be agile. Be focused, and make sure that you're ready to go with whatever changes happen. So, Paula, I think that's going to be kind of wrapping it up for us with the final couple of questions there. We were scheduled for 45 minutes. There's some other questions from the audience, which we have, and my guess is we're going to be able to go in, identify those, and we'll be able to get back to you, because there were some really good questions. So, Paula, any other thoughts from you before we wrap up?
No, I just, thanks for those questions, and I apologize we didn't get to them, but Jason and I will actually put an email out and answer the questions that were asked. They were great ones about what we think about skills and their interrelation and how we define critical thinking and so forth. So lots to do there. Before we do close, I want to let you know that we're going to let you back to your to-do list for today. We take these sessions seriously and are truly interested to know if you found this valuable. So please rate this session using the Rate This button on your console, or better yet, reach out to Jason or myself with questions or thoughts you have on the topic. We'll follow up with an email with a recorded copy of this presentation that's yours to revisit or share with your colleagues. And on behalf of Jason and I and Kepner-Tregoe, thank you again for your time, and we wish you a good morning, afternoon, or good evening.
Thanks so much, Paula. It's nice presenting with you.
Same here.